Welcome to In the News for May 16th, 2025. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Brett, I always love these podcasts because I like to play this game that I call Where in the World is Brett Burney? Last week you were in
Where?
Chicago. You have meetings
That's right.
everywhere. You're in meetings in
I
Puerto Rico right now, which is exciting. I've never been to Puerto Rico
I
before.
am
Interesting.
indeed in Puerto Rico, San Juan. I tell you, the flight was nice and comfortable, except like there's just nothing to look at except water, when you're going over here. But it's very nice. We're at a resort. We're actually with the Law Practice Division of the American Bar Association, talking already about next year's ABA Tech Show, a conference that you and I go to. And yeah, it's been nice, except for the fact that the first day I got here, the sun was out, beautiful. I got to look at the beach. I didn't go to the beach because I'm like, well, there's got to be time for me to go to the beach later. And of course, the last 2 days, it has been raining the entire time, clouds everywhere. So, okay, I guess I'll sit at the bar and have a mojito or something. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's very fun. Last week I was in Chicago, and you mentioned the fact that, hey, say hello to the Pope if you see him, happen to see him. Didn't get to see him, but I did enjoy seeing the first story that you talked about this morning, Jeff. Like, not only do we enjoy the Apple Watch, apparently the brand new Pope enjoys the Apple Watch as well. You
Yeah.
had a link to a story here from 9 to 5 Mac. The newly elected Pope wears the Apple Watch on his first official mass. Just thrilled to see Apple getting
Yeah.
blessed, I guess, from the very beginning here.
There's been all sorts of interesting stories about him as, first American Pope, man of the people, from Chicago, roots for the White Sox. But it's funny that he apparently is a tech person, wears an Apple Watch, presumably uses an iPhone. I linked to a story that his brother was being interviewed by the AP when
Yeah.
the Pope actually called him. And I thought it was funny that his brother had what it looked like it was an iPad mini, but he was using it as a phone. And I've seen some people do that, especially older people, because it can be everything's a little bit bigger and stuff. I say that as if I don't prefer things bigger as well. And
Right.
so I thought that was sort of interesting. But anyway, it was just sort of a silly transition, and though into the one of the big, gosh, there's quite a few stories this week from Apple, but one of the big ones, of course, was the new CarPlay. Goodness.
Yeah, I know. And which I loved your little transition from the Pope into CarPlay. It's like the Pope Mobile of Peace, because Pope Francis, donated his Pope Mobile. And then you wondered, which was such, again, a nice segue, maybe the new Pope Mobile could have CarPlay. Because as you mentioned, the new Pope has an Apple Watch. That means certainly he has an iPhone. Why not also have CarPlay in his brand new Pope Mobile? That could happen.
Well,
It ties in good timing, right? Because what you're talking about in reference is the fact that CarPlay Ultra just came out from Apple this past week too.
Yeah, CarPlay Ultra has been a long time coming. Apple announced a number of years ago that it was going to have what it called the next generation of CarPlay. In fact, at one point,
Yes.
Apple said that it would be in cars in the year 2024. That did not happen since we're here. Spoiler alert, it is now the year
Eh.
2025. But
Right.
one of the rumors that we heard about the delay was that Apple had the technology ready to go. And just to pause for a second, the technology being that CarPlay would, number one, it would extend to the multiple screens that modern cars
Right.
have. And number two, it would be able to integrate with the car to display things like how fast you're going, what your car tire pressure is, control the climate, AC and heating in the car, that sort of stuff. But so that's been in the works for a long time. But one of the rumors was that some car manufacturers didn't like the idea of letting Apple take over the entire look of the screens, because if the screens are a
Right.
big part of the car, and that's why famously companies like Tesla and stuff would never even support CarPlay in the first place.
Don't support it. Right.
On the joke about the Pope Mobile, I said that the rumor is that it's going to be a Mercedes-Benz class, but Mercedes-Benz is one of the companies that famously pushed back, according to the rumors, pushed back. They have CarPlay. They're definitely on board with CarPlay, but they pushed
Right.
back a little bit on the next generation CarPlay, which we now know is called CarPlay Ultra, because they wanted, for example, the dash to reflect, their style. And they didn't want to have just some generic Apple designed, every car is going to look the same, because they're all going to have that CarPlay interface with this sort of that modern, colorful look that, we all know for CarPlay. And so my sense is that behind the scenes, Apple has been talking to car manufacturers and sort of regrouping and said, okay, we're going to change next generation CarPlay. And so it can actually reflect your personality and style. And what we've now
Mm-hmm.
seen from the first one, which is Aston Martin, which of course is a very stylish and expensive car, sure enough, the screens that they have many of them reflect sort of that unique Aston Martin style. I'm not a car person, but like that sort of deep green, and the design
Hmm.
in Great Britain and all this sort of stuff. And so it's something that would only look like this on this car, and it would look different on other cars. Now I'm sure there will be some generic screens that you could optionally choose to use on like your
Right.
dashboard, for example, that would be the same no matter what car you're in. And some people may opt to do that. But my guess is that they took additional time in part for this personalization and in part to work with car manufacturers and get them on board. And so it's going to be a big question for me. Apple has announced a few people that are supposed to be coming out with this, but way back when, years ago, they had a big long list of people that currently supported CarPlay, and we expect to support the next version of it. That list is now, Apple is being a little more close to the vest. I think negotiations are still ongoing. But my hope, because
Hmm.
I love CarPlay, my hope is that
Yeah.
most vehicles will get on board. Famously, some companies like GM don't want to do CarPlay because they prefer to have their own system where they can upsell you for things, stuff like that. But my hope is that most cars that we want are going to be available with CarPlay Ultra, because to get to the next part, CarPlay Ultra looks really cool. And we have seen some
Yes.
still images for years now of what it might look like. But one of the favorite things that I linked to this morning was this hands-on review from Top Gear, which is a
Oh
sort of
yeah.
a BBC thing, and they have a guy who was actually, and I apologize, I don't remember his name, but he actually was in like an Aston Martin. My understanding is that current Aston Martins that people own today, people with a lot of money own today, they're going to have a software update within weeks that's going to allow you to use CarPlay Ultra. So there will be people driving around with this like within a month, which is really cool. Obviously a very small number of
Nice.
people. So this is ready to go. And the video that he showed up here is really neat because, you've got your regular CarPlay screen. It's a little bit wider than the ones that we're
Right.
used to. And that's nice, but that looks the way that you would expect it to look. And then you have the CarPlay screen, the second screen, which is where your dashboard is. And it's really interesting. It completely replaces like the odometer and all the other, meters that are there. You can display all sorts of information. You can have like different tiles. Like you can have like, your speed on one side and your RPMs, and in the middle, you can choose what goes in the
Yeah.
middle. Do you want the map? Do you want to see what you're listening to, like what your music is? Do you want to see your car tire pressure? You can sort of opt for those different things. Or you could have like a complete full screen. It's this really cool one. Like, for example, with maps, the map goes the entire
Yes.
length. It's a huge, long map. And then at the bottom, it still tells you, as it must, here's how fast you're going, here's how much,
Correct.
gasoline you have left, or if it's an e-vehicle, what your battery is. That information is still there, but it looks really cool. So that's neat. And then the other thing that I thought was cool, Brett, is on the more traditional CarPlay screen, that thing we all know about that's sort of in the middle of your
Right.
car. It's not only does it have these new apps, because it can have like an app to control things like your car temperature and like a radio if you want to listen to the radio, or things like that. So you can actually control some car features that in the past you would have to use the car's own app and do everything from within there, or
Correct.
or maybe
Right.
even get out of CarPlay completely. Now that can be all really integrated, which is nice. But also, they showed this cool feature of called widgets. And I don't know if you saw this part of the video, Brett, but as soon as I saw this, I'm like, oh, I know what this is. This is standby. This is standby mode. I'm literally looking at it on my
Oh,
iPhone right now, where you can have standby mode. And one of the modes of standby is the widget mode, where your iPhone is like sitting there
I
on like
see.
MagSafe, and you can have two panes, one on the left, one on the right, and you can decide like a
Oh, here it
clock on the
is. Yeah.
left. Yeah, you're showing it right there. A clock on the left and the weather on the right, or my calendar, my upcoming events on the left, and the music I'm listening to on the right. And you decide. So this exact same tech, it just shows you Apple does this. They come out with something for one product, and you think,
Yeah.
oh, that's really cool for that product. But behind the scenes, Apple is thinking of how can we take this and use this on different, take it from the iPhone to the Mac to the Apple Watch to the whatever, and to the car. And so this is really cool. So it means that Apple knows this. They've got this technology down, and it's going to be familiar and comfortable to many customers because
Exactly.
we've already done stuff like this. We know widgets. So I'm just super excited about this. I now I want a new car. I want a new car. I
An
will
Aston
probably
Martin.
not be buying an Aston Martin tomorrow. I don't know. I have to talk to my wife about that. I'm not sure if our finances will support that, but I'm excited about this. And again, car plays move slowly but maybe my next car will have it, or certainly the one after that. And I'm excited about that.
Hmm. First question that I had, I don't remember hearing the CarPlay Ultra branding before
That's
now.
brand new.
I
Yeah, that was announced
okay. Well,
yesterday.
I know
Yeah.
we've talked about. I guess I felt like it's always been called CarPlay version 2 or like the next version,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I was a little surprised because I think the only other brand that matches is the Apple Watch, right? The Apple Watch Ultra and the CarPlay Ultra. I had never heard the Ultra moniker kind of applied to this before, but like you
Yeah.
said,
Don't they
it's
also use
brand
it
new, so that's why.
for their chips too? Like if like the M2, the M2 Ultra. I think there's an Ultra version that
Isn't that
combined two
Pro and
chips.
Max?
Pro
Oh, huh.
Max. Oh, maybe there's an
Interesting.
Ultra. I
Yeah.
forget. But yeah, you're right. It is, and it's something, and that name, has been kept quiet all this time. You know that they've been talking about it, and yet it hasn't
Right.
leaked. I mean, when Apple announced this yesterday, this was the first time that we Ultra. I had heard no leaks that it was coming to the Aston Martin, no leaks it was coming. It was going to
Yeah,
be
that
called
was all new
Ultra.
as
This is
well.
all new. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, they have the M4, M4 Pro, and the M4 Max. So I don't know if
It's
that's what
not
you
the
were
M4
thinking or not,
version.
but
Go back
okay.
to the M1 or the M2. Some of the older which
Oh,
you're gonna
okay. I'd
it'll
have
be
to.
harder to
I
find.
don't even know where to
But
find that anymore. But yeah, okay.
yeah,
But
they
it's
used to have
possible they
that.
may have. But I guess just from that aspect, just like first I'm like CarPlay Ultra, like is this brand new? But
Hmm.
it makes sense, and they can brand it what they want to on that. And then the second thing, just as I was listening to you and looking at some of these pictures, which are great in this little press release that they have there, it is exactly what I would love to have for my car. I've been saying this for a long time. It's like I just want car makers, car manufacturers to produce a fantastic shell, and then my iPhone will power all of, because right now
Yeah.
everything is electronic anyway already. So it's like just the iPhone needs to be plugged into my car's onboard computer to show me the oil level and the heat and the tire pressure and all that kind of stuff. But I want to be able to customize the way it looks, because right now the way it happens is I've got my CarPlay window in the middle, right, and it shows whatever I'm playing from my iPhone, like from Spotify or Apple Music,
Right.
and then the car manufacturers try to give me the ability to see that in front of me. They give some kind of ridiculous, primitive looking listing of like, hey, you're listening to CarPlay. I'm like, I know I'm listening to CarPlay music. I don't need you to tell me again. Like, I just want everything to be in a nice package that I can customize. I mean, just even one of these shots down here where it shows like the Apple Music, like the cover art of what I'm playing, plus the fact that I can do all of this. And then the last thing quickly, I'll just tell you, this must have been maybe a year and a half ago. I think I reported this on the podcast. I had a rental car. I think it was a Chrysler. So this is before CarPlay Ultra, but it did exactly what you described as far as having the map. Like the entire dash was a complete screen in front of me, right? So I did have the Apple CarPlay screen on the middle console. And then the only option that I had was to have the entire map, stretched out across the entire screen. But it was amazing, Jeff. I loved it
Hmm.
because I didn't have to glance over to my right to look at the screen in my CarPlay. I had the entire map in front of me. And just like you said at the bottom, it had like my speed and my odometer and everything else that I needed, the information there. But I absolutely loved that. And I don't know what Chrysler had done with this specific model. I can't even remember what the model is. My son would remember. We were together on this and we were just geeking out over this, Jeff. But like that was one of the first times that I have ever experienced that. And it's like ever since then, I've just wanted to go back into that. Now, that didn't give me the ability to kind of customize, the speedometer and everything like that. But just having the capability to see a much bigger spectrum of the map was amazing in and of itself. And I'm like, let's get there. Let's get there as
It's
soon
funny
as
that
possible.
you mentioned design, and this is something that's always really just sort of made me curious. Cars historically have been a design playground. I
So
mean, right? You think of like that
so
what the
bad
cars
though.
look like on the outside. Well, no, but this thing on
Yeah.
the outside of cars, classic cars, with whether you like them or not, but they have the Volkswagen Beetle and the sports cars
True.
and Lamborghini, cars from the outside. That's the reason that so many people are car people, because from the outside they have the
Hmm.
ability to look amazing and historic. I mean, you think of the fins and the 60s and everything else, the design of car has been amazing. And yet the screens, like on my Honda, I mean, I just have a Honda Accord, but when I switch from CarPlay to the regular screen in my Honda Accord, it's
Oh,
like gone back to DOS from Windows. I mean, it's
yeah.
like ridiculous. It's these hard, like who,
Monochrome.
like clearly you
Right.
employ people that know something about design. Did you just not consult them when it came
Yeah.
to your
You just do
menu?
the
And
outside. not
Yeah,
the
when you
inside.
switch from the CarPlay to the built-in menus, it's like, oh, mama, this is bad. And so I thought it was interesting that in that interview from Takier, he interviews somebody with Aston Martin that's like their head design guy, and
Oh,
he
really?
asks the obvious question of, you know, aren't you a little worried about giving, design is so important to your company and you have such a history of it. Do you worry about like giving that up to Apple? And the guy says, his answer is basically, on the one hand, we did work with Apple. That's the whole point of this new CarPlay Ultra, is we've
Okay.
designed things for us. But number two, he looks at him and he's like, we're talking about designers for Apple. Like, these guys are good. They are the top of
Boom.
their field. And I wish that more car manufacturers recognize that, is don't necessarily seed everything, but
Yeah.
recognize that the
Yeah.
people at Apple, they do know what they're doing when it comes to design. And so they may have something to contribute to this discussion. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Plus, there's all the obvious things that you and I know, that CarPlay is nice because it can be updated every time your iPad updates, your iPhone updates, versus
Exactly.
the car's interface never changes after you buy the car, even if you use the car for 3, 5, 10 years, who knows how long you have a car. So isn't it so much nicer that you can have the
Right.
ability to improve the, so anyway, I'm excited. I love
It-
CarPlay. I'm excited about CarPlay
yeah.
Ultra. Yeah.
I'll add one more just quickly. Like in CarPlay already right now, like when my wife gets in and plugs her phone in or connects her phone, she's got like a different background, a picture, and all the apps that
Right.
she uses. When I get in, I get to have all the apps that I want, and I like a lighter mode, and some, my kids like a different screen in the back. It's like it's almost like I just want that shell of a car. And like you said, beautifully designed on the outside, but when it comes to the inside, which is what I'm going to be staring at for for the hours that I might be on the road, then I want to be able to customize that, and I want my wife to be able to do, and my daughter to be able to drive what she wants to drive. Anyway, I feel like it's coming. It's just, you're right. Apple has to continue to do work with the car manufacturers, and I don't want to put blame all in their lap. I understand where they're coming from. I do. You don't want to give that up. That is, you have eyeballs for hours a day, right, of people that are sitting in your car, and I understand you don't want to give that up. But I love that. I didn't get to watch that part of that video, but that's it. It's like they get it. Like Aston Martin, like, we know what cars look like. We can design even a beautiful leather covered dashboard, but we're not good at designing the actual interface. And of course, Apple has years on that. So I'm just glad you reported on that. I'm thrilled that we went from the Pope's Apple Watch all the way to CarPlay Ultra. That's a beautiful segue on there as well. But that's not all that Apple announced this past week. This is what I actually heard a whole lot more about, because, while while the CarPlay Ultra only affects those people that may already have like a brand new Aston Martin within the last 2 months or so, Apple announced a slew of accessibility features, and we are obviously big fans. We've talked about all the accessibility ability features that Apple keeps coming out with. Now, the reason that they did this, because one of the questions that a lot of us have is, is Apple announcing all these things, when we're like, what, 2, 3 weeks away from the WWDC keynote address, which is typically where they would announce some of these things. Well, I can't answer that question about CarPlay Ultra. Maybe you can, but I can answer the question. This was most recently the Global Accessibility Day, right? It's GAD, GAAD. I can't remember exactly what it means, but Apple has done this in the past, right? They've released things, the new features in conjunction with this Global Accessibility Day, and it's just this one, man. There's some great features in here.
Apple has been fantastic. I mean, love or hate Apple. There's a lot of things that Apple is not getting a lot of good press on right now when it comes to developer relations and App Store and
Right.
stuff. But one thing that the company has always been good for, besides most of its design decisions, as we just discussed, is accessibility. They have gone above and beyond in making their devices accessible. I'll always remember, years ago, of people I've encountered in life that have, serious limitations on vision and hearing and stuff like that. And they're able to
Correct.
use their Apple devices. And I'm amazed when I see it. And I love it. Plus, as you and I talk about all the time, accessibility features work for everybody. And so many of us find them that we want to use,
Right.
even though maybe it was designed for somebody that's completely blind or deaf, but we can all use it, or has mobility issues. So for Global Accessibility Awareness Day, for the past, I forget how
Awareness
many
Day.
years
Yes.
now, 5 years now, Apple has taken those announcements, as you said, that they would normally announce at WWDC, and they've announced them earlier on the day. And it's a great way to sort of give them space to shine and let us think about them. And there's so many
Yes.
of them here. I won't go through all of them in the nutrition labels and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I particularly like the magnification things, though. And this one's just personal to me,
Oh,
because I'll tell
yes.
you, Brett, my
Right.
my vision's not, even with my corrected vision on my glasses, I think my corrected vision is like maybe 20/50 in my right eye, which is my best eye, which means that, what normal people can see 20 feet away, or what normal people can see 50 feet away, I have to get 20 feet away to see it the same.
Okay.
And so
Gotcha.
if I'm just, looking at the CLE PowerPoint, or I'm in a restaurant and I'm looking up at the menu items at like a fast food restaurant, I have some difficulty seeing it. I'm certainly not blind or anything like that, but these sorts of things that, like, I would love a future where my Apple glasses have this built-in ability that I could just press
Oh
something
yeah.
and have it zoom in on something. Because what I do now is I will often with my iPhone take a picture of something, and then just zoom in on it. I do this at CLEs, for example, all the time. Is there's something on the
Hmm.
on the PowerPoint slide, and I can't quite read it all because people do a poor job of having small type on slides, which is a whole nother issue. But anyway, but I'll take a picture of it and then I can read it. In fact, what I'll often do is take a picture with my iPhone, move it over into my iPad where I'm taking notes, and then maybe I'll even
Right.
include the picture as a part of my notes if it's something I want to remember in the future. But also, it's easier to read. And so this new magnifier feature, there's two different ways. One version is if you're using your Apple Mac laptop in a classroom, you can just connect your iPhone to it using the same connections that they use for continuity camera if you're using it as like an external webcam, but you just have the iPhone pointed the opposite direction at the board or whatever, and you can zoom in and not
Right.
just make things bigger, but if it helps your eye, you could even adjust it. You can straighten it, of course. You could adjust the colors so that if you read some certain colors based upon your eyesight
Exactly.
than others. So like this is just a really cool feature. Apple had all of the pieces to do this, but they put it all together into this feature, and I just think it's really, really cool. So that was one of them. I'll go on to talk about some other ones too, but anything that you want to say about those before I move on?
Just first of all, a lot of people don't even know first that there is a magnifier app on the
Hmm.
iPhone, and this is so. I think you addressed this. I mean, the announcement is that the magnifier app came to the Mac, but first of all, I just want to quickly say the magnifier app on the iPhone and the iPad is
Great
really
app.
fantastic. And a lot of people say, "Well, what do I need that? I'll just go into the camera and I'll just do the zoom." But I don't know what additional technology they threw into this magnifier app, Jeff. But I have used this many times if I need to get even closer to something, like especially if I need
Hmm.
to like take a picture of a label on like a hot water heater or something like that. I have used this app many times to get really straight in, or if it's some even today, I don't think I'm quite as bad as you on the eyesight, but I'm getting there. But there's like some little tiny bottle, and I need to read the text. Instead of trying to squint and like get the light right and everything, I'll just take a picture of it with the magnifier app, and then I can zoom in. I can do some of that with the camera app, but that's not where the magnifier app stops. You can do the detect mode, which is great. I use this when I do presentations on AI because I'm like, you already have AI built into you're holding it in your hand. Because if you go into the detect mode in the magnifier app and you point it at something, it will tell you what it's looking at. Like it knows if it's a cat sleeping on the ground or if it's a table and a chair. Now, obviously, that's not meant for folks like me. It's meant for folks that may have some ability, compromised ability to see or understand what's in front of them or so. But I use that a lot, just to show people like that's already built in. And there's many other things that you can do within
Oh yeah.
the magnifier app as well. But the story that you're talking about here, and it's a great little video that you put at the bottom of your post as well, is the fact that you can use the magnifier app on your Mac, but in conjunction with the iPhone. And I just think it's great. And if that doesn't really make a lot of sense to you, this little video that you posted, it's just fantastic. I mean, I'm just smiling the whole time that I'm
Oh
watching
yeah.
this
Oh
little
yeah.
video because she's in a class similar to what you were just talking about, and she's sitting way up in the top, but there's like little writing on the chalkboard. I think is what it looks. I don't know why the professor's using a chalkboard, but be that as it may, but she's able to zoom in and not just like capture that information so that she can see it up close because obviously she's hard of seeing, hard of sight, but she can also like skew it correctly and she can make it bigger and put it on a different colored background so that she can see it. It just a brilliant way to look at that. I'll make sure that that video link is in the show notes.
So let's go from sight to sound. Okay.
Okay, good.
There's two
Good segue
features that
again.
currently exist that Apple has enhanced, and you may or may not know about them. One of them is live captions, and one of them is live listen. Live listen is a neat feature that came
Okay.
out a couple of years ago where let's just take the
Yes.
classroom environment since we're there. Imagine you're sitting back in the classroom and you would just have difficulty hearing the professor. Maybe they're not using like a speaker system or something like that, and so you just couldn't hear
Right.
it because your hair is not good. One of the things that you can do now is you can take your iPhone, ask the professor if it's okay, and just put that iPhone close to where the professor is speaking or whoever else is speaking. And then with your AirPods, it will basically enhance it. It's not just that it makes it louder, although it does that too, but it can also reduce some of the surrounding noise and concentrate on the voice
Yeah,
so that it
amazing.
just makes you easier to hear the voice. And it's a really cool feature. That's Live Listen. Live Captions is another currently available feature on the iPhone that provides you with this real-time transcription. And if you turn it on through accessibility, and then like you just maybe put your iPhone close to someone speaking, or hand it to them so that the speaker on your iPhone is there, but that you can see it, it will, as they're talking, it will in real time transcribe the words of what they're
Whoa.
saying. So it's really cool.
Okay.
And so that way, even if you couldn't hear them in real time, you could keep up with what they're saying just by reading the words. And so they've done lots of enhancements to this.
Wow.
For example, one of the enhancements on live captions is that you can now have it on your Apple Watch as well. So in that example I just had, where if somebody
Right.
has the iPhone closer to them so that you couldn't see the screen, I can just look down at my Apple Watch and the words will show up on my Apple Watch as they're showing up on the iPhone, which is really, really cool. Now, I'm looking forward to a future where, I mean, you talk about how Apple takes pieces and then puts them all together. We're so close, and I think there's even some third-party stuff that does this now, but like I think it would be cool to have a day in which through my AirPods, I have a conversation with someone in a different language. There was this thing called in the Douglas Adams Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy, there was this thing called the Babel fish, where like you put this little fish in your ear, and the idea is the fish can translate, and it was in many of his books.
Nice.
But the idea would be that someone else could speak, Russian or Chinese or Spanish, and number one, the iPhone would transcribe what they're doing, which we already have right now, but that's live captions, and then we would translate the live captions from whatever their language is into English, which again, many apps
Mm-hmm.
can do this right now. And then it would speak those in real time. And it would be just like the people that are in the UN, where one person is speaking in French and someone has a little thing and they've got like real people that are, in real time, re-saying it so that they can hear it in their language. But, if we had this, and we're so close to it, and there are some third parties that already do it now, but just to have this all built in, which is literally, it's just one more step from what Apple is now
Yeah.
announcing. I mean, Apple's announcing this in terms of the accessibility standpoint. This would just be sort of a universality. I mean, you could travel the world or talk to other people that even in your own
Right.
locality speak different languages, and you could have conversations. And we're just so close to this being built into everything, and it's just the natural extension. So that's really exciting. The
Hey,
next thing I was
Jeff,
going
real
to talk about
quick.
was the brain implant, but before I go there, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I don't think that you put this a link in this, but this past week, iOS 18.5 did come out. In fact, I think I just updated all of my
Hmm.
devices. Do
Yeah.
do do you need to update to 18.5 in order to get access to some of these accessibility features? Do you
Actually,
know?
I don't
I
think
was trying
any of
to
these
see
features
that.
are out
Okay.
now. I think this is all going to be iOS
Oh,
19.
gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Okay.
Apple doesn't say
Okay.
that explicitly in the press release because they haven't announced iOS
Yeah.
19 yet. We know there's going to be a next iOS. We know it's going to likely be called iOS 19, but they just
Okay.
haven't said that yet. So that's why they're a
Okay.
little
Okay.
cagey. They say things like coming later this year, but we know what that
Right.
means.
Right.
It means that in September, presumably, when iOS 19 presumably comes out, it's going to be in there. And so that's why these are things that in the past they would have announced at WWDC when they actually announced the next iOS, but they're just giving us a month preview today. So I don't think any of this that's announced is available right now. Um, the last thing I was going to mention, if you're up for it, is this brain implant that the Wall Street Journal talks about. That, oh my goodness, they have this example of this guy who has ALS, which is basically paralyzing. Many people with ALS can't control anything except maybe their eyes. But they already today have these really cool systems that I've seen, like Steve Gleason, a former player for the New Orleans Saints, is a big ambassador for ALS and stuff, and he has these computer screens in front of him on his wheelchair that he can, with his eye, it's slow, but he can select words and letters, and then he can use that to speak, so that just using his eyes, he can communicate with the outside world, which is cool. What Apple has, another way to do that instead of using your eyes is, and this is just so futuristic, you actually implant something in your brain. And there's this company that Apple's working with, which has done this, and they've had some success in the labs where they put something in your brain and it reads your brain waves. And based upon your brain waves, you are controlling like an input device or whatever. And so what they have an example here is they have this guy who I think he's in Pittsburgh or something like that, Philly. That he has ALS, so he can't travel. It would be difficult. It would be unrealistic for him to travel the world. And yet, somebody can put an Apple Vision Pro on him, which, as you know, from trying mine out a few weeks ago in Chicago, you're on the Alps of Switzerland, or suddenly you're underwater. You can be wherever you are, and he's controlling what he does just by his brain waves. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is just, oh, I don't even know what to say. Science.
Well, that is definitely amazing, and equally amazing, well, perhaps not quite, because while this thing about Find My on an Apple Watch may not be quite as life-saving or life-amazing as what we were just talking about here, this was a great article. Glenn Fleishman, writing for Six Colors, talked about how to locate an Apple Watch, and I guess some other devices, if they're not connected to your cellular network or a Wi-Fi. How does that work? I have wondered the same question, and I'm glad that Glenn answered it for us today.
Yeah, and what's great is that the answer is so detailed. Glenn Fleischman recently became a member of the staff of Six Colors, and for years,
Yay.
like a decade at Macworld, he'd been doing this, question and answer column. And so the question is a simple one that he's answering. If you have an Apple Watch that doesn't have cellular, can it update Find My? Because I
Yeah.
actually pay for the one that does have cellular, which means that no matter where I
Same.
am, regardless of whether my iPhone's with me, it knows where I am. If I fall and I can't get up, I can call 911, and it can tell them where I am and stuff, and that's really good. But what if you don't have cellular? How does it do that? And Glenn, in his typical, fashion, he's always so detail oriented. To answer the question of how it works, you actually have to look back at all the different ways that Find My can work. For all sorts of devices, not just the Apple Watch, but also things like AirTags and stuff like that. And so
Right.
it's a really
Right.
interesting article. If you're interested in Find Mine, and I think Find Mine is such a great technology, I love that Apple has it. I think it's worth checking out. I mean, just to give you some of the highlights, he points out that
Yeah.
if your Apple Watch can access Wi-Fi, which it can do because any Wi-Fi network that your iPhone knows how to access to, it shares that to the Apple Watch. And so even if your iPhone's not with you, if you suddenly walk in your home or you walk in your office where it already knows to get on that Wi-Fi, including with passwords, then Wi-Fi, it's not GPS, but because it knows where the Wi-Fi router is more or less in the world,
Mm-hmm.
it can give you sort of an approximation of where you are in the world. And so that's why, as long as you're within Wi-Fi, your Apple Watch can do a pretty good job of figuring out where you are and then updating the Find My servers. But there's other things too, because an Apple Watch, like an AirTag, can just sort of use its Bluetooth to sort of, broadcast, quietly to the world, so that if you just left your watch someplace or something like that, or if it was on your wrist but not connected to either Wi-Fi or cellular, if somebody else has like an iPhone, for example, that passes within distance, all iPhones are constantly
Yeah.
listening to the world around them. And if they pick up a device like an AirTag or another iPhone or a Mac or an Apple Watch, they've for privacy concerns, they don't know what the device is, but they know the very unique identifier associated with it, and that gets updated to an Apple server that says device number 1265127 was in this location at this time. And
Hey.
so when you later then go to say, where is my AirTag? It says, oh, well, the AirTag, that's associated with number such and such, and it was last seen in this location. And so that's a neat service that you can use. I mean, even with like AirPods and stuff like that, if I leave my
Yeah.
AirPods in my office and I can't remember where they are, somebody like even the older versions of AirPods, so if somebody else happened to walk by it or something like that, you could figure out where it was. I always think it's interesting that I have an AirTag in my car. I don't know if you have that too. And so,
Mm-hmm.
the AirTag doesn't communicate with the outside world, but I'm amazed that I can always find exactly where my car is, because just, living in a city, someone with an iPhone is going to be walking somewhere in the vicinity of my car every couple of minutes, unless I'm parked in the middle of an open field somewhere or something like that. And so it's neat how it works. So the article, he answers the question of how the Apple Watch can figure out where it is, but it's interesting because he talks about all the different ways that Find My can work to share locations that you can find things, whether you're looking for your luggage, your AirTag, your car, what have you. Neat stuff.
Obviously, I enjoyed reading the article because I can geek out on it. But at the end of the article, I'm just like, I'm glad it just works. I don't have to
Yeah,
understand it,
that's the
but
great
it's just
part.
amazing that it continues to work the way that it does. And thank you, Glenn Fleischman, for covering that. Let's move to the iPad just for a second. A great article that you linked to 10 very useful things you probably didn't know that Spotlight on the iPad can do. Spotlight, you might say, what in the world is that? Well, if you've been using a Mac for any time period, you know Spotlight is sort of like the all general search tool that we have for searching everything on the Mac. And that is available on the iPad. And I use this a lot because it's not just searching, right? I have always used it on the Mac to launch apps instead of going to the applications folder and everything. And I'm just going to guess, I think that's one of the 10 items in here that this is from iPad Productivity, right? By Matt, that puts that one of those items might be that you can launch apps from there. But oh my goodness, there's so much more. Some of these I'm just like, this is amazing.
Yeah, in fact, if you have a Mac, you can do a lot of these things on Spotlight on a Mac too. If you have
True,
an
true.
iPad, if you put your finger in the middle of the screen and sort of swipe down, you bring up that little bar. Or if you have a keyboard
Hmm.
attached, you can do, I think it's a Command Space is the
Command space.
control.
Yes, sir.
And then it
That's
brings it
right.
up. And of course you could search for, items like a find, but I use it as a launcher too. So I don't feel like going to
Yeah,
the screen to
yeah.
launch Safari. I just hit Command Space and then I start to type SAF. And once I see Safari, I hit return and it launches Safari, which is great. But
Bingo.
he
Right.
points out there's lots of things you can even do in here. Like you can ask it to do currencies. I mean, you can just say something like,
I see
pounds to
that.
dollars, and it will give you the translation. You can have it do some math without even opening up the calculator
Yeah,
app. You can just
calculations.
launch that
Yeah.
up. Find photos by describing them, and it can even link to some of the answers that Siri might give you, like definition of a word or simple Wikipedia answers. And so this is a
Hmm.
useful list to look through. That there's a whole lot here that you may not have been thinking about that you can do just by using the feature. And by the way, I'm talking about using the iPad, but of course on the iPhone as well, you can also pull down and swipe. And I guess I'm testing right
I was just
now.
going to
I
ask.
think that
Yeah.
some of these same things would also work with the iPad. If I do, two times, three and hit return. Yeah. So if I just put two and then the asterisk and then three, it
That's
tells me
I
two
was
times
trying
three
that
is
out too.
six. Yeah. So it's again, whether it's more or less convenient, I don't know, but just keep in mind you don't necessarily have to, a lot of stuff can happen right then and there, right
Yeah.
in that feature.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I know this is from a site called iPad Productivity. So obviously the focus is on the iPad there. But that little, I always tap in fact, now at the very bottom of your iPhone screen, it used to be just dots. And sometimes it will go to dots because that's how you can swipe back and forth to your home screens or it shows you how many home screens you have. But it also says search down there. So you can just tap in that, although you can also
Hmm.
swipe down just in the middle of the screen as well. And, you can do calculations and similar things in there too. It's a great way. That's how I search for apps all the time that may not be on my first
Sure,
two home
sure.
screens. I will do a search for that as well. So anyway, great little article there and some tips. You mentioned Bluetooth just a few seconds ago about the Apple Watch and Find My. And Bluetooth has been kind of one of these interesting technologies that we've had around for a very long time now. I I would have lost money on a bet to say what version of Bluetooth are we on right now? I had no idea. We're on Bluetooth 6.1, but apparently that's getting ready to update to Bluetooth 6.1. And I guess there's a few things. I don't know how much this can be improved, to be honest with you, at this point with the kind of technology that it is. But I'm always happy to see that there are some updates.
Yeah. Whenever Bluetooth is updated, like you say, there's not a lot that it does, but we want to have more features, which typically means being able to send more information more quickly. We want it to go further. We want privacy because one of the problems with Bluetooth is some of the earlier versions of it, like somebody else could sort of spoof your Bluetooth and control something that you own that was, enabled by Bluetooth. And then, power efficiency and stuff. And so those are the overall things that Bluetooth tends to improve.
Uh huh.
6.1 is going to have two of those. It's going to enhance privacy by ensuring through encryption and stuff like that, that only devices that are supposed to be talking to each other are talking to each other. We have some of that now. It's going to be enhanced. And then additionally,
Okay.
more power efficient so that using Bluetooth doesn't run down your battery quite as much, which is, of course, always a good thing. So this is coming, we currently have 6.0, which arrived last year. 6.1 has now been announced. The speculation in this article is that it will be included this fall in new devices, like for example, the next version of the iPhone presumably will have 6.1. And so, it always takes a while for the new
Right.
standards to propagate, but then eventually they'll be in all of our things. And so, it's one of the ways to get a little bit of a preview of what's coming in the future for Apple products is to the extent that Apple relies upon open standards like Bluetooth, seeing what they're announcing as coming soon.
I like the way you started off one of your stories today. If you know what you mean when you say dog cow, then you might be interested in this next story. This was nice because, again, we're looking forward to WWDC, their developers conference coming up in a couple of weeks. And we talked about accessibility features and CarPlay Ultra that Apple has already announced, or they are announcing the fact that it's going to be coming. But in addition to that, they have, I guess it's like in honor of the developers coming, right? That there is an Apple developer app, and they are now some stickers, including one of the stickers is the dog cow, which has been around for a long time.
It has. So if you download, and you don't have to be an Apple developer to do so, if anyone downloads the Apple developer app from the App Store, which is free, one of the things
Hmm.
it will do is it will allow you in the Messages app, if you go under stickers, there will be some new stickers for associated with WWDC. And there's a couple silly ones, like one of them is a pig flying, when pigs fly sort of thing.
I see.
But one of them is the dog cow. And just for people that don't know what it is, let me just, if you give me just a second,
Please.
when the original Macintosh first comes out in 1984, so when it's being designed, even before 84, having a graphical user interface was such a new thing. Some computers had done it, but never in a mass market device. And so one of the
Right.
things that, everything has a little graphic associated with it. And one of the things that they needed is when you print things to know if you're printing, portrait or landscape, what direction something is. And so they wanted to have just something on the rectangle that represented a sheet of paper to show which way it was facing. And so I believe that Susan Kare came up with this. Susan Kare, Kare, was the
Yep.
one of the people
Hmm.
responsible for all of the original icons on the Mac. She's just a fantastic graphic artist. And so she came up with the idea of what sort of looks like a dog, but because of the way the spots are located, it sort of looks like a cow. And
Right.
based upon what direction that dog/cow, people call it a dog cow, is he standing up or is he on its side? You could immediately tell whether, what direction something was going to print in, what direction the orientation was. It was just such a smart way. Everybody could look at it and tell whether he is up and down or on his side. And so over the years, there was a time way back when Apple on its campus would actually take some of those original Susan Kare icons and had like big, cut, blow ups of them that
Yeah.
would be like on the grass outside the buildings. They took those down years ago. But, of the things that longtime users of Apple products, because it hasn't been, actually you can still find it somewhere every once in a while. But,
Hmm.
the people that, date back to the 80s, certainly in even the 90s, they will recognize the dog cow. So, and I think it's cute to put it in the developer app as a sticker
Oh,
because
yeah.
a lot of, developers tend to know the Apple history. They've been with the company a long time. And
Uh-huh.
so they know instantly. It's sort of an inside joke. They know exactly what this is. So if you want that, you can download it and you can share it with your friends. Plus, there's another one too. I think there's maybe 10 of them here that you can
Yeah.
share.
Looks like
So
it.
if for
Like you
some
said, the
reason,
pigs fly and
yeah, like
yeah,
an
the
owl using
developers
a Mac
conference
and
logo.
just
Yeah.
silly little things.
Good
So
stuff.
if you want some free stickers, go ahead.
This next story falls under the category of wish I had never read this because now I can't unsee it.
Completely agree.
This was a story in Engadget where talk about somebody that it wants to geek out on fonts, which I'm all about it. Like I like to talk about fonts every now and then, and maybe I can just kind of encapsulate this story. He always figured that there was something off when he looked at the Notes app. I guess on his
Mhm.
iPhone is most of the time that he's talking about it. There was just something about the font that was being used in the Notes app, which is the font that is pretty much used almost everywhere else, right? On any kind of an iOS device or a Mac or so. But there was something different and he couldn't put his finger on it until finally he tracked it down. And it turns out I didn't know that there was a single story A and a double story A or two story A, but there is. And once you read this article, you're welcome. You're never going to be able to unsee this again. Why in the world did they change the lowercase a for the Notes app, but they use a different lowercase a for the rest of everything? You have to kind of, this is one of these things you got to see it to really understand what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's definitely a geeky thing, and it's funny that it bothers him. Once you see it, of course, you definitely recognize. Oh, yeah, there's two
You're
different
like,
ways. Much like you can
oh,
have
yeah.
two ways to have the letter I. It could be just a single up and down, or you could
Uh
have the
huh.
little serifs on it. But the letter A, but it
Right.
really is
Yeah.
a truly different version of the A. And he says it's almost like they had to go out of the way to do it this way because the font they're using, which I believe is called San Francisco, I forget, but
That's,
like
I think
it,
it's
it
like it's a customized version. Yeah. But it's
it
San
was a
Francisco. That's right.
purposeful decision for Apple to use this single story version of the letter A, which is the same version that you might use if you're just, handwriting a lowercase a. It's probably the way that you would do it. I can't imagine that
Right.
most people would handwrite a double story A because it's more complicated. But it's just an interesting little design flaw. The one thing that occurred to me when I linked to this, and I put this in an iPhone JD, was that the original one, not the very first Apple logo, but like sort of the second Apple logo, the one that came out in the late 70s and was there through the
Oh
80s.
yeah.
It was, it had
Yeah,
the
you linked to that. Yeah.
the six color apple, and then it would have the word Apple in lowercase. And the A of the lowercase apple was using sort of a stylized version of a single story A, not a double story
Uh-huh.
A. But that's just a coincidence. It's one thing that I thought about. So, but it's funny that like you say, once he mentioned this,
Interesting.
now after reading this article, when I look at the Notes app, it
Yeah.
does sort of stick out. I don't know, like a sore thumb, but it does stick out to me. It's certainly a decision. It is a design decision, which he's not too
A
thrilled about.
design
You know,
decision.
it's interesting.
It's just like now every time I can't use the Notes app now because I'm like, oh man, it's not matching everything else. It's crazy. In the
Uh,
show,
in the
one of the
show.
one of the shows that we have been talking about for at least the last 3 or 4 weeks is called Murderbot, which I never read. I think was this a comic book or a book? I forget. It's some kind of a science
It was
fiction,
a book, yeah.
which sound amazing to me. I've never read it, but I loved the trailer, and now apparently, in fact, I think you said you already watched like the first 2 episodes, right? That have come
Mhm.
out on Apple TV Plus, and you sound like you like it.
I do. And Apple TV Plus has really been firing on all cylinders recently. We just finished Severance, which was so good, The Studio, which was so good, so many good
Hmm.
shows.
Hmm.
And here they are just coming out with another one. Just as one ends, they start another good one. And at least we hope it is. The initial reviews have been very good. When Apple released it, they dropped 2 episodes, and the episodes are only about 30 minutes each. So, you can watch 2 episodes in about the same time that you would normally watch a 1 hour show. And when Apple releases things on Fridays, they will typically drop at 12 a.m. Eastern, which means for me in the Central Time Zone, I
Right.
could watch them at 11 p.m. And so last night, I literally I just finished typing in the news post, and I wasn't quite ready for bed, and I'm like, you know what? I bet you this show is there. And so I just went
Ooh,
to
okay.
I actually put on my Apple Vision Pro and watched it, and it was really cute. I haven't seen a show like this before. It's funny, but it's not like a
It
comedy. It's not
sounds
like ha ha
ominous.
funny.
Like, yeah, Murderbot sounds
Certainly.
like it should be like a horror movie or some kind.
And you find out within the first couple of minutes why it's called that, and it's a little tongue in cheek.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's but the one thing that is known is that Alexander Skarsgård, who's been in so many great things. I loved him in what was the vampire show on True Blood on HBO years ago that he was
Okay.
in, and he's done many other things too. But he plays like a robot, like an android robot who is supposed to be programmed to be, so methodical and follow directions and everything else. And, not much of a spoiler alert to say that he has some independent thoughts. And it's just an interesting role for him. And it's like, it's situational funny. I mean, it's not like they're telling jokes or anything like that, but the situations are so absurd and over the top that it's really interesting. The whole thing takes place in an incredibly futuristic world, space and stuff like
Okay.
that,
Okay.
where we're interacting with, robots as if they're part of our everyday life. But it looks like it's a really funny premise. And like I spent most of the first episode sort of thinking, I've never seen anything like this. And then once I sort of got into it, the second episode, I'm like, okay, I'm on board for this. And I'm not saying that this is going to be
Nice.
like, Severance, but I mean, you're pulling up Rotten Tomatoes
Right.
right now, and it's got a
I know. Is it
98% on the tomato
still?
meter.
Oh,
So
98. Okay.
98%.
Still, I mean, that's
So I mean,
incredible.
it's getting some good early reviews. And of course, some of the reviewers, like not people like me, but real people, they've probably seen more of the season than I have. Well, so I'm excited.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
great, we have a fun new show on Apple TV Plus. It's going to be sort of funny. It's going to be sort of sci-fi. I'm on board. Yeah.
Jeff, can I tell you quickly? Talk about the shows coming out on Apple TV Plus. One you didn't mention, but you convinced me last week to trying. And so my
Oh,
wife and
so
I
glad.
watched the first 2 episodes last weekend and absolutely loved it. Like that's going to be our show. She was rolling. I mean, there's some really cute, funny sections in there, and it's really good. So I just wanted to tell you thanks for that, and I would
Yeah.
recommend that to a lot of other folks. It's called Trying. It's about a couple that have some difficulty having a baby naturally, so they're going through the adoption process, and it's a feel good but funny at the same time. It's really neat.
Yeah.
It's really neat.
And as we discussed last week, it just got picked up for its fifth season. And so, you're starting a
Oh,
show that
that's right.
there's going to be tons of great episodes. So you and your wife, because
Right.
my wife and I watch
Right.
it together too, y'all have lots of stuff to go through now. So that's always fun
Oh,
to
it's
find
so
a new
fun.
show that's got lots of episodes.
Shrinking is another one that I think we maybe watched like the first episode. This is one with Harrison Ford in it. Am I correct? Like
Correct. Correct.
he's a psychiatrist or psychologist or something along those lines. And
Mhm.
I don't remember how many episodes or seasons that this has gone in, but oh my goodness, what an announcement! Michael J. Fox now is going to join season 3. Okay, so it must have two seasons already, and Michael
Yeah.
J. Fox is going to be a guest star in season 3. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's worth getting back into it because the first season's really good and it continues to be really good for season two. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it's a Bill Lawrence show who has done, a bajillion shows,
Oh
Scrubs.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
He knows Michael J. Fox because way back when he did Spin City, of course, Bill Lawrence was involved in Ted
Wow.
Lasso. And in fact, also from Ted Lasso, Brett Goldstein, who is a writer on Ted
Oh
Lasso, but
yeah,
also played, Roy Kent in Ted Lasso.
Roy
He is
Kent,
one of
of
the
course.
writers in this show, and I don't think it's much of a spoiler alert that he actually shows up in the show eventually. So it's a great show. I really encourage people to watch Shrinking. So for season 3 coming out, Michael
Okay,
J. Fox.
okay.
Now, Michael J. Fox, as we all know, he's had Parkinson's disease, and there was a really good documentary called, what was it called? Shaken or something like that. It was on Apple TV Plus about Michael
Oh
J. Fox
yeah.
that
Okay.
my
Okay.
wife and I really enjoyed watching it way back when. It's definitely worth watching because he was such an iconic actor in the 80s and 90s and so
Absolutely.
good. And on the one hand, it's a shame that his acting career was cut short, but at the same time, it's amazing that he's continued to be involved and done shows, but he hasn't actually done a
Right.
show because he's
Right.
got severe limitations on movement. But he hasn't done a show, what, in 5 years now? But Bill Lawrence convinced him to come back. So is it going to be like a full member of season 3 cast? Is he going to have like 1 5-minute cameo? I don't know yet, but I love Michael J. Fox. And so for a show that I love, to then have an actor that I love coming on it next season, I say, yay, this is going to be great.
That's going to be great. That's going to be great. If there was one movie already that I would like to watch on the Apple Vision Pro, it would probably be, what is it called? It's F1, right? You talked about this, or did we? Where did it come out, Andy? You were talking about this. I mean, first of all, it's Brad Pitt, right? Starring
Yeah.
in F1, and there's somebody else.
Mhm.
And I remember you did link to this 3 or 4 weeks ago because the trailer is incredible in and of
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and the whole time I'm sitting there imagining what would it look like on a Vision Pro. I don't know if they're like specifically doing it for the Vision Pro, but it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, this show is coming to the big screen, and I think rightfully so. This is one of those shows that people might want to
Okay,
watch in a
good.
movie theater because it's going to be great. And then after it's in the movie theater, it will come to Apple TV Plus, and like you say, I would love to watch it. But Apple,
Yeah.
this is the big movie for them of the year, and they're really hoping for it to be the hot summer movie. I don't know when it's coming out, but I got to presume it's coming right around July 4th when blockbusters, typically will in the summer. And so this is going to be a big movie, and so now is sort of a little bit of a cross marketing feature. We've talked in the past about how there are certain cities in the world that have this enhanced detailed city experience. And you and I just talked a few weeks
Mm-hmm.
ago because New Orleans now has it as of when the Super Bowl was here earlier this year. And so it's cool that when I'm looking for things in New Orleans, I can see incredibly detailed 3D representations of buildings and stuff like that. It's really cool. And so they also brought it to Monaco. Why Monaco? Well, because that, of course, is where the
Well,
Grand Prix is, which starts in just a few days now, and also where I think last year at the Grand Prix, Apple filmed a lot of the scene, or maybe it was even 2 years ago. They filmed a lot of the scenes for F1, the movie, and so it's just sort of a great little
oh,
cross
okay.
promotional
All
thing.
right.
So if you want to take, open up your iPhone or your iPad or your Mac, actually, I'm not sure if it's on the Mac yet, but definitely the iPhone and the iPad, you will see much more detailed maps of Monaco, including where the cars race, and you can see the rate, the streets that
Okay,
become the
that's
racetrack
nice.
and stuff. And
Yeah,
you even see
yeah.
little representations of little cute little F1 cars in the Maps app and stuff. And so it's a nice little cross promotion for the movie coming out.
Okay, so I see this only in theaters on June
Hmm.
27th, like you said,
There you go.
and specifically it says filmed for IMAX. So,
Hmm.
I'm almost confused about what that means today. I mean, IMAX, I think of a big theater with a big dome on it, right? But
Hmm.
does that mean that kind of same experience will come to the Vision Pro? But isn't that different with the spatial video? Or,
So
do you have an
yeah, so
idea of
I
what that means? Okay.
So I don't think that this will be spatial, but IMAX is actually great for the Vision Pro, and here's why. A traditional
Okay.
movie has the really long screen, like, and if you're watching a movie on TV that's shown in the same aspect ratio as the movie theater, you'll have the black bars at the top and bottom, because even on our current 16:9 TV screens, our screens are not as long and wide as it would be in a movie theater, right? IMAX, however,
Right.
when they film things for IMAX theaters, because the screens are so big, not only are they bigger width, but they're top to bottom much, much bigger. And in fact, it's much closer to a 4:3 or sort of, an old style, maybe between
Right.
16:9
Right.
4:3. I don't know the exact numbers,
Hmm.
but everything's a lot taller. So what it means is that to see this entire movie this summer, you're not just going to want to go to a theater. You want to go to a theater that's got an IMAX size screen to really see
Gotcha.
the
Okay.
entire picture.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to the Vision Pro, there is the company IMAX has an app for the Vision Pro that has a couple things on it. And one of the things that I like about it is when you're in the Vision Pro, it's not immersive. It's not 180 degrees. But when you watch an IMAX movie with that aspect ratio, because it's
Uh-huh.
tall as well as being big from side to side, it actually makes it immersive with an asterisk. It's a better experience. If you're watching something in that aspect ratio, it looks better on the Vision Pro because you can just see more. So I do hope that when F1 comes to the Vision Pro and Apple TV Plus and stuff like that, I hope that they have some way, whether it's within the Apple TV Plus app or maybe within the IMAX app, I hope there's a way to watch it in that aspect ratio, because I
Okay.
think it will be better. And I think they
Gotcha.
could do that. And as I'm saying this out loud, Brett, in one of the companies that has some of the best movies out there, especially on the Vision Pro, is Disney. And one of the things I like about the
Yeah.
Disney app is if you're a fan
Okay.
of the Marvel movies, you can actually
Hmm.
choose in the Disney app if you want to watch the version of the Marvel movie that was for IMAX or the version that was for the regular movie theater. And so the
Oh,
IMAX version is
interesting.
going to have a little bit more on the top and the bottom. And when I watch those on the Vision Pro, it's actually nice because like I just described, watching something in that aspect ratio fills more of your field of view. And so now that I'm saying that
Right.
out loud, I'm sure that Apple TV Plus will be able to do this within their own app and not make you use the special IMAX app. So I just hope that they release it in that format when they do eventually release it. So, but of course, if you want the best experience with the best surround sound and everything else, go to an IMAX theater this
Right.
summer. If you're a real car nut, this, we'll see what the reviews are like. But if it's as good as one hopes it will be, this will be a blockbuster.
In the know.
In the
I thought
know.
in honor of learning that the new Pope is also an Apple Watch wearer, and maybe he would listen to the podcast, and we could share some tips about using the Apple Watch. Here's a quick one that I was talking with somebody yesterday, and he wanted to show me a picture. And typically, what do most people do when they want to show you a picture? They pull out their iPhone or their phone and they scroll through their photo album or their Photos app, and they find it. But he didn't do that. He just pulled it up on his watch and then just kind of like leaned over so that I could see it on his watch. Now, obviously, it's not as very very large, and I wanted to see it, but it just got me thinking. I don't normally look at photos on my watch, and it's not like you can have access to all the photos, but there is a Photos app on the watch. So if you go into your apps, you can pull up the Photos app. And really, what it does is it syncs one single photo album from your iPhone to the watch. So that's by default in the Photos app. There's other apps and things that you can get access to this. But if you're just using the basic Photos app, by default, that album is your favorites album. And so if you go into your Photos app, like on your phone, for example, there is a favorites photo album, right? And you can tag certain images and photos as your favorites. And that album, that favorites album by default, is what will sync from your iPhone over to your Apple Watch. And so I can pull up my Photos app on my Apple Watch. I can tap in there and I will see this little tiny screen of the different pictures that I have saved as favorites. And sure enough, I can go into one or two of them. I can go into each one of them and see it. Obviously, it's a very small screen and what I'm looking at, but it can at least give you the idea. Now, if you don't want it to sync the favorites album, you can change that. To do this, you need to go on your iPhone to the Apple Watch app, and you can go down and scroll down to Photos, And when you go into the Apple Watch app and go to Photos, you'll see that there is the album. Which album do you want to sync? And you can go in and you can see when you say sync album, you can select the album that you want to sync over to your Apple Watch. And I found when I was flipping back and forth between these albums, Jeff, it was pretty quickly. Like I could watch on my watch as it was updating that, and I could switch it back. Also, in the photos, in that settings, you can say a photos limit. So I only have I don't know, I think maybe 40 images in my favorites photo album, but you can go to the photos limit that will allow you to sync 25 photos, 100 photos, 250 photos, or the max is 500 photos. So if you have more than 500 photos in this album, it may not sync them all. I'm assuming that's just due to limitations on the storage space, that kind of a thing. But I just like the idea that you could either just leave it by default to the favorites album and then just know that that favorites album will be accessible on the Apple Watch as well. Or you could go in theoretically and you could create a new, Apple Watch specific album on your iPhone in the Photos app, and you could just have that synchronized over to your Apple's Watch. I got to tell you, I don't do this a lot because it's like if I want to see a photo, I will go to my iPhone probably. But sometimes it is kind of fun to maybe just go into my Apple Watch and to look at those photos. And now you can select which photo album that you want to sync over to your Apple Watch. So that's my Apple tip today.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned it because, as I mentioned, maybe it was even last week, I had recently gone through and re-updated, reinstalled from scratch my operating system on my phone.
Yes, I remember that.
It reset. So, like right now, if I go to use my Apple Watch, to use the photos thing, which I tried to use as you were talking about it, it's not working for two reasons. Number one, I haven't set it up yet on my phone, and number two, I don't use the favorites feature that often and so I don't think I have any favorites set up right now. So I would have to go favorite some things, or what I used to do, and I was just looking for that album. I want to say that in the past I went through and I made a little album called something like Apple Watch faces or something. I'm just not finding it right now, of things that I thought, here's some good ones, and it's really nice because as they can take the picture and they can sort of put the clock behind them and it looks 3D and it's nicely done. So this is a good tip. There was a time in the past where I had not been using this watch face and I went ahead and I used it, and it was fun because it's fun that you sort of glance down and you see different pictures. For me, it was my kids and stuff like that, and sometimes my wife, and it was like, oh, those are fun pictures. Nice to see them in the watch. So it's a good reminder to use this. Good stuff. Very cool. So when I saw that you were doing this tip, it reminded me of let me step back from your tip and look at the bigger picture, which is the different faces you can do in the Apple Watch. As much as I am upset that Apple doesn't allow third parties to come up with their own Apple Watch faces, I have to admit, when you look at this page that you have it here, and I'm sure you'll put the link in the show notes.
Look how long this scrolls, Jeff. I mean, look at this. It goes on forever.
There really are a lot of different watch faces, especially considering you can customize these. So it's not like we have 5 to choose from. We have a ton. They just are all from Apple, and not all of them support all the features and stuff like that, like secondhand that you can see all the time.
Right.
But my recommendation is, if you're looking to spice things up in your life with your Apple Watch, as it were, one of the things I like about the photo watch face is that it's full screen, and I actually find it really nice to look at the Apple Watch and see something that's really big. And it's especially true. I have the Series 10, which is an even slightly bigger screen and stuff, and of course you have the Ultra, which has a big screen as well. Why not take advantage of that big screen and really look at something that goes side to side, up and down, just to spice things up every once in a while? Photos will do it, but if you go through this list, there's actually a ton of them that will do it. California, Contour, Kaleidoscope. One of the things, the one that I actually have right now I think it was just this past week that Apple released the new Pride bands for the Apple Watch, and in connection with that, they now have the Pride watch face, which I am using right now. It's hard to see.
Now that is updated, right? You have to have iOS 18.5, I believe, and
you have to have the new
update on the watch.
Yeah, I can't get it to show up on the screen, but there you go. It's a really nice little thing. It's got these cool sort of designs, and you don't have to have the bands to show it. And it's a cool design, but this is not the first time. Apple has come out with Pride watch faces for many, many years now, and each of them is interesting its own way. But I particularly like the ones that give you, it's very colorful on the entire screen. So this year's version of the Pride does it. Now, another one that does it great is the Snoopy watch face. The Snoopy watch face
Yeah.
is awesome, and I switch to it from
My
time to
wife still
time,
has that one
all
on.
the time, and I love it because you get to watch Snoopy do something funny that lasts about 5 seconds, but it's also really pretty because it takes the entire watch face, so it's a nice big bold color on the entire watch face, and I think it looks really really nice. In fact, parenthetically, let me say something about Snoopy. If you own an Apple TV device, one of the screensaver choices that they came out with a while ago was a Snoopy screensaver.
Oh, that's
I've had
right.
it enabled for
Yeah.
a few months now, and to my complete surprise, Apple updates that all the time. The animators that work for,
Really?
Charles Schultz Industries, which has obviously an affiliation with Apple now, they are constantly updating the animations, and it's funny. I mean, it's Snoopy animation, so whatever. It's G-rated humor, but it's cute and funny. And whenever my Apple TV goes into the screensaver mode, sometimes I see ones I've seen before, but I'm amazed at how frequently I see brand new ones. So thumbs up for Snoopy. The last thing I'll say on my pitch
Awesome.
for having an Apple Watch face that uses the entire watch face is there's one that's been around since generation one called Stripes. And Stripes is just so simple.
Oh,
It's just some
okay.
stripes,
Here it
but it's
is.
actually
Yeah.
nice because you can control how many stripes you have. You can either have one stripe, which is just basically one color, two, three, four. They have one, two, three, the seven on the one that you're showing right now,
Oh, no
but you
kidding.
can control what those colors are. And so I have a series of stripes that are saved on my Apple Watch that, for example, for Christmas, I have some red and greens back and forth. Or for Mardi Gras, I have purple,
Nice.
green, and gold. And I have a couple other ones when, my daughter's school, their school colors are green and white. And so sometimes I have like just some green and white stripes. It gives you the
Oh,
ability
that's
to
good. Yeah.
create a watch face that supports the colors of your team, your school, the holiday, whatever it is. And so it's the closest you can get to designing your own watch face because you have so many choices in the Stripes app, and it's one of those full
Yeah.
screen, very bold ones. So if Stripes is one that's, because
Oh,
it's been around from
wow.
the beginning,
That's great.
it's probably one that you don't even think about using because you're like, oh, that's the old stuff. I want to look at the new watch faces. I'm here to tell you that Stripes is an oldie but a goodie. It's worth looking at. So
This is,
that's my
you can
pitch.
change the angle of the stripes as
You can change
well,
the
Jeff.
angle.
I did
Exactly. It's
not
not
know
just
that.
they can be horizontal, they can be vertical, or they can be at an angle. It's a ton of customization that you can do on this, and you can come up. And then once you come up with the set,
Oh,
you
that's
can save it.
cool.
So you can have
Of
your
course.
set that's for your college, your set that's for your high school, your set that's for your local
Right.
sports team, and you can switch between them.
And I like, you could even do that full screen like you were talking about, or you can do a circular stripes, which
I
means you
usually
can
don't
have
use that
four
one, but they
complications.
yeah,
I know, because I like the full screen like you were talking about. But I'm
but you
just
can get the
saying, to your
complications. Yeah.
point, there's so many things that you could do in the colors. I remember I had a stripes face when that first, either when it first came out or you had mentioned it a long time ago, something like that. But I forgot that you could get in this. Yeah, that's fantastic. And there's even
Yeah.
a time lapse one in here. I
Yeah,
think I
that's a neat
remember
one.
when that came out. It's just so cool to. I feel like sometimes I don't have the time to go through, and like when you've linked to this page before, I remember, or we've gone through this page, and it's just amazing how many there are. But typically, we only hear about it because people are upset that you can't customize the faces, and I think
Mhm.
what they're talking about there is they want to be able to, they want, like, they want stripes, but they want to be able to determine whether there's a second hand and an hour hand, or or if it's digital clock versus analog clock. I mean, I get
Sure.
it. I know that you always want a little bit more of a deeper thing in here, but if you just take some time to look around, it's really some pretty amazing watch faces that you can come up with here on there.
Yeah, there's more
That's
than you probably remember. It's worth checking out this. If you've been an Apple Watch user for a long time, like many of us have, it's worth taking a look at this page and just reminding yourself, oh yeah, the such and such, and oh yeah, the such and such. There's a lot there.
Yeah, I'll make sure it's linked in the show notes. Okay, we started and we ended on the Apple Watch today. And if the Pope Leo wants to any additional tips, we'll be happy to serve them up. Just let us know, send us an email, or call us on FaceTime, since obviously you have your Apple Watch. Great talking with you, Jeff, and we'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye bye, everybody.